Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers actually happened. People were connecting the dots the entire cycle. It seemed like that was their guy from the start. They really felt like they were chasing him hard. Jim Harbaugh is now the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers and of Justin Herbert for this new era of the Chargers that we're going to be walking into. What do you think about this?
I feels like I've been resigned to this fate. I don't know. I mean, not in a bad way, but resigned to this for months now.
It felt like the stars were aligning where this was probably the place that he would end up. They were driven to get him.
Yeah.
It's appealing because of Herbert. A lot of things fell into place where this made sense.
To me, it felt like it was Harbaugh or Ben Johnson, because I felt like the top offensive candidate, or Harbaugh, who's probably the top auxiliary candidate, as opposed to an offensive or defensive coordinator, the third option.
If you could have Jim Harbaugh,
yes,
or Mike Vrabel, because you said he's probably the best, CEO overall coach, but I want to actually interrogate that a little bit. If you could have either one of those guys, who would you choose?
I think Harbaugh, if it's only 3 years, because I just remember the 49ers tenure, and it was just by the end, everyone goes, yeah, maybe he is suited for college because he runs everybody out, like grinds them down over 4-year span, so maybe the first 3 years, but I think Harbaugh would be my answer, even though I really respect what Vrabel does, even if I do have some issues with other things that he does.
I think a lot of people are just tacking this up to a definite positive. Like there's no downside. Right. This is right. This is the best thing they could have done. I maybe don't know enough about Harbaugh's Michigan tenure to say that. Obviously he did an incredible job. His ability to build a program and to kind of resurrect a team and a culture, I think has been proven. He did that in San Francisco. He did that with Michigan. I guess I just have some questions. Like you said, the last time we saw him, it was 10 years ago. He was grinding down players and wearing on people then. And this is a very different NFL and a very different pool of players, and coaches, I think, interact with players differently now than they did 10 years ago. And I don't know enough about his the on-field advantages he might give a team, what those Michigan teams looked like. I watched the college football playoff, but not much else. So I guess just playing devil's advocate, I wonder if there are some downsides to this that maybe people haven't been as quick to explore because it feels like the Chargers needed a big swing, and this is a big swing.
And I even say it would continue that, thinking that some people are saying he's, the QB guru and QB whisperer type. I don't think Herbert really needs that, but maybe more just a better surroundings around him. But to me, that was kind of like, when? Andrew Luck is Andrew Luck. And that around Alex Smith, it was cleaned up, because I think that was just more the offensive system was cleaned up, which I think is his number one, strength. His offenses are going to be very sound, at least schematically. It's going to be very powerful. That's what he's going to push for. I mean, in the run game and also vertical in the pass game, it's a classic run first, shot play later kind of offense. I actually think it's going to be great with Herbert. But I also think when you see the first coordinators that are rumored with him, it's like Greg Roman as OC. And I'm like, again? So I like him maybe as run game coordinator and tight end coach or something like that.
That would be cool. And because I think the Chargers specifically need that. If you look at just the lack of run game they've had over the last couple of years, trying to build that makes sense. But I want to see a slightly different answer when it comes to building the pass game.
That's exactly it. And I'm just thinking, like, those 49ers passing games, where it wasn't like this exotic stuff that everyone was copying. It was just kind of
jumped on people with a very new version of NFL offense in 2012.
It was more of the run game too. And that's also another thing. The offensive line has some talent, but it also has some holes still. So I actually makes me think that they go offensive line with their first pick, which is a discussion for another time. We have plenty of time for the draft. But I think that pass game makes sense. I think that the run game is going to be what they're going to build around. But then you have older Austin Eckler. You don't have a lot of talent at the running back position. You got to remember when he got to San Francisco, got to think of the pieces that he had already. He just kind of streamlined everything and made it work for his personality.
Joe Staley, Mike Iupati, Anthony Davis. I mean, all those guys were already in place with Frank Gore. So
Gore is the running back. Yep.
And dropping Colin Kaepernick into that, it made them a dynamic, devastating rushing team. But again, that's 10 years ago. So I'm curious, as someone who watches more college football and study that Michigan team, has watched J.J. McCarthy, what are the on-field advantages of a Jim Harbaugh-led offense. Because I know Jesse Minter, their defensive coordinator, Michigan, is a bit hot name. If he goes with Harbaugh, I think that's very exciting.
That's a
win. He comes from the same world that Mike Macdonald comes from. Obviously, Macdonald was the defensive coordinator there 2 years ago. But offensively, what stands out about those Michigan teams that you watched over the last couple of years?
Hyper designed run games. And the college football playoff was the best examples. I thought the Alabama first quarter and a half run game was some of the best stuff you'll ever see. Just a lot of shifting, a lot of motion. So we got those buzzwords out of the way. We got that. Use of personnel. Okay, we got that out of the way. Okay, there you go. We got hit those checkpoints. But I thought he's always been like this. This is how it was in San Francisco. This is how it was at Stanford. It's a very, I don't want to use the term over-designed, but over-coached. But it's hyper designed where it's like, we are shifting this guy to this. So you do this. And it's like a slower, kind of what Shanahan does, but slower, more methodical. Yeah.
I remember, man. I remember all those arc release quarterback runs. And I mean, they just used to do so much cool stuff back then. Yeah. So it's going to be fascinating. And I think the other thing to take into account here is the organizational dynamics at play. Yeah, they don't have a general manager. Right. They have not hired a general manager. So I have to assume that Harbaugh is going to have a lot of power and a lot of autonomy within that organization as he shapes this thing, which now leads me to a question about what does the next 6 months look like for the Los Angeles Chargers? Right. Because under a different regime, I could have seen them really tearing things down, where you trade Joey Bosa, you move on from Khalil Mack, you cut one of the receivers, maybe you restructure Keenan Allen to get that number down. But this is a team that's $40 million over the cap and very old. They're closer to a full-scale rebuild than they are to contention, in my opinion, personally, from a roster building perspective.
Defense especially, yes.
And
yes,
defense
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
But even offensively, you got Slater, Johnson, you need a new center. Yep. Trey Pipkins is under contract for 1 more year. You think that they should draft a tackle, which I think is totally reasonable. If they draft a tackle, they need another receiver somewhere along the way. They need a running back, and defensively, they need help at every single level of the defense. So in a vacuum, I think this is a nuke the shit out of this thing. Let's get a clean slate in 2025, and then we can start building it up. Does Jim Harbaugh want to be a part of that? Is that his timeline? Or if you spin it the other way, does he want to work with a blank slate because he wants to build the roster in his image? So I don't think it tips their hand either way. To me, it just leads to a lot of compelling questions about what the direction of the team is going to look like.
There's, of course, the coaches he hires is going to be huge. The free agency, how free agency goes is going to be huge. I just want to bring it up again, is that first pick where they trade back, what position they go after is going to be so telling to me. Like, because it's like, are they going to get more picks and think, well, we got to revamp this, and this, and this, or we think we're going with the line, or we getting a weapon? Like, I don't know. I think that pick is going to be so telling. Like a lot of teams, the picks are telling because that's what they're investing in. So with Harbaugh, especially, it's just, it's again, I feel like I've expected this and now I'm coming to grips with it. And a lot of it, there is a lot that I do like. I want to just emphasize that I do like most of this, but there are questions. It's not a perfect slam dunk. Like none of these hires are. And I just think with Herbert, it's much better to have this streamlined thing. Harbaugh's going to find an answer. It might not always be pretty. Sometimes it's brute force, but he's going to work at it. And I think that's a way more interesting to have somebody with a consistent vision with a quarterback like this. And that's why I'm like, I'm okay with this. I actually want to see where this goes because at least it's consistent. Going from what Telesco was doing at GM, like drafting these certain types of players and the scheme that was being run, there was always a disconnect. Here, at least there's going to be a hive mind. It's going to be Harbaugh's hive mind, but hey, at least that's better, I think, than what they had previously.
I think that's a great point. And when I was playing devil's advocate earlier, it was mostly to play devil's advocate. Absolutely. I'm excited to see what this looks like because you talk about a consistent vision, and it's a vision of physicality. Yeah. And that being the feel of this organization, when you compare it to what they felt like over the last couple of years, that is a drastic departure, especially on offense. They could just never figure out the run game. And when you look at the way they built the staff and the way that they constructed the offensive system when Staley got there, it all makes sense on paper. You know, we're getting a little bit of the Shanahan stuff and we're getting a little bit of the Sean Payton drop back stuff where we can kind of make the quarterback the system and his mental acuity really drives this thing forward. He's going to have all the checks, yada, yada, yada. It all makes sense on paper, but it is a little bit discombobulated and it is a little bit scattered. And when you have a consistent vision at the forefront of this, it's easier to not feel scattered. And I think that's probably why this was attractive to them. This is a program building. We
Yes.
have an identity sort of decision, and I can understand going that direction when you've been searching for one over the last few years.
And just one last thought on this is that I know we're talking about the run game and everything, but the key is Herbert. And I remember those Stanford teams with Andrew Luck there, and that's the last time Harbaugh's had a dude at QB. McCarthy's a nice player, but Kaepernick was a nice player, Alex Smith, but they're all not Herbert, and they're not Andrew Luck. And he let it rip. So that's the thing, is there's going to be a lot of run stuff, but there's going to be a lot of stuff down the field. And I think there is a path for this to look really, really fun and really explosive, but with some Harbaughness to the whole picture, which I think will be fun.